There's a machine in a museum in Buckinghamshire, 6 feet of clattering drums and coloured wire, and the government that built it once treated the man behind it as one of the most valuable people in the country. He had a pass to a place that officially didn't exist. He helped read German naval traffic that Berlin believed was unbreakable. 12 years later, the same government took his security clearance away, shut him out of the agency that grew from that work, and a court ordered him to take a year of hormone injections. Not for spying. Not for selling anything to anybody. For having a boyfriend. He was 41 when he was found dead in a bedroom in Cheshire, with a half-eaten apple on the table beside him, and 70 years later historians still can't agree on how he died. What he actually built, what he definitely didn't build, and who got quietly erased so that he could be sold to you as a lone genius, is a stranger story than the film version. It starts with a schoolboy who lost his closest friend at 17 and spent the rest of his life asking whether a mind is just a machine. Alan Turing. He was born on the 23rd of June 1912 in Maida Vale in London. His father, Julius, was a civil servant in the Indian Civil Service, which meant the family's centre of gravity sat 6,000 miles from the family. So Alan and his older brother John spent long stretches of childhood parked with a foster family on the south coast at St Leonard's on Sea, while their parents were in India. That's the shape of the early years. Affection at a distance. Letters instead of parents. He went on to Sherborne, a boarding school in Dorset, in the mid-1920s, and the school was not the right container for him. He was untidy. He had no patience for the classics that the place was built around. He was doing mathematics well past anything the staff were teaching, and doing it his own way, which, at an English public school of that era, counted against him rather than for him. Then, in the sixth form, he met somebody who changed the direction of his entire mind and lost him inside 18 months. The friend was Christopher Morcom. They met in the school library in September 1928 and began spending Wednesday afternoons together on mathematics, chemistry, and astronomy. Biographers describe Morcom as his first love, and by most readings, the feeling ran one way only. On the 13th of February 1930, Morcom died. He was 18. The cause was bovine tuberculosis, picked up years earlier from infected cow's milk, which is the sort of detail that makes the 1920s feel very far away. Morcom's family endowed a science prize at the school in his name, and Turing won it twice, in 1930 and 1931. Then he did something you might not expect from a hard-headed mathematician. He wrote to Christopher's mother, on and off for years, trying to work out where a person actually goes. One of those letters, from July 1933, is headed Nature of Spirit. In it he writes that when the body dies, the mechanism of the body holding the spirit is gone, and the spirit finds a new body sooner or later. Hold on to that word. Mechanism. He spent the next 20 years asking what a mind is made of, and whether you could build one from scratch. He went up to King's College, Cambridge, in October 1931, and took a first in Part 2 of the mathematical tripos in 1934. What happened next is unusual even by Cambridge standards. He wrote a fellowship dissertation on the Gaussian error function, in which he proved a version of the central limit theorem, apparently without knowing that somebody had already proved it a decade or so earlier. The electors didn't care. In 1935, at 22, he was elected a Fellow of the College. Among the men doing the electing was John Maynard Keynes, probably the most influential economist alive at the time. On the 11th of March 1935, Keynes wrote to his wife Lydia about who he'd had to lunch. The candidate, he said, seemed much the cleverest on paper. He was excellent. There could not be a shadow of doubt. And then, almost as an afterthought, 4 words. Turing his name. He lived in Bodley's building overlooking the river and rode in the college bumps. 22 years old, a fellowship in hand, and within a year he'd write the paper that founded an entire field, while going after a question about the outer limits of mathematics itself. The question came from David Hilbert, and it has a magnificent German name, the Entscheidungsproblem, the decision problem. Is there a general mechanical procedure that can take any mathematical statement and tell you, in a finite number of steps, whether it's provable? Hilbert suspected there was. To answer him, you first have to define what a mechanical procedure even is, and nobody had. So he invented one. Picture a device with an endless paper tape, a head that reads and writes one symbol at a time, and a finite table of rules telling it what to do next. That's the whole machine. Deliberately stupid, deliberately simple. He showed that this thing can compute anything a human being following a fixed procedure can compute, and then he showed there are questions it can never answer. So the answer to Hilbert was no. The paper is On Computable Numbers, submitted in November 1936. Here's the part that stings. An American logician, Alonzo Church, had reached the same conclusion months earlier by a completely different route. Turing added an appendix acknowledging it, then sailed to Princeton to take a doctorate under the man who'd beaten him to it, finishing in 1938. It was Church who named the device a Turing machine. On the 4th of September 1939, the day after Britain declared war, he reported to a Victorian country house in Buckinghamshire called Bletchley Park, home of the government code and cipher school. The problem waiting there was Enigma, the German cipher machine. Rotors, a plug board, and a setting that changed every single day. The number of configurations to search through ran to roughly 158 million. You couldn't guess it, and you couldn't test them all. Within weeks of arriving, he had specified an electromechanical machine to do the searching, and the clever part is that it doesn't work by brute force. It works by contradiction. You feed it a crib, a stretch of German you expect the message to contain, and the machine runs through rotor positions, throwing out every one that produces a logical impossibility. The first of them, nicknamed Victory, became operational in March 1940. He also ran Hut 8, the section attacking German naval Enigma, the hardest variant of the lot, and invented a statistical method for it called Banburismus, named for the town where the punch sheets were printed. That's the version you know. The version you almost certainly don't know starts in Poland, 7 years earlier. In the 1920s, the Polish Cipher Bureau did something no other intelligence service had thought to try. It hired mathematicians. 3 of them, Marian Rejewski, Henryk Zygalski, and Jerzy Rosicki, went at Enigma with algebra, and Rejewski worked out the internal wiring of the rotors from intercepted traffic alone, without ever seeing inside the machine. Then in September 1938, the Germans changed the way they enciphered message keys, and the Polish tools of the moment went dead. So Rejewski designed a new one. An electromechanical cracking device they called the Bombe, 6 of them running by the middle of November. Zygalski cut perforated sheets. Rosicki worked out the clock method. And on the 15th of December, the Germans added 2 more rotors to the machine, which took the possible wheel orders from 6 to 60. 10 times the work, overnight, and Poland had neither 10 times the sheets nor 10 times the people. So on the 25th of July 1939, at a meeting near Warsaw, 5 weeks before the invasion of their country, the Poles handed the whole thing over to French and British intelligence. Reconstructed Enigma machines. The wiring. The methods. All of it. Now, the museum that keeps the Bombe rebuild is careful here, and so should we be. The Polish Bombe was nothing like the machine later built in Buckinghamshire, and the British technique was a different attack on a problem the Polish method could no longer reach. But nobody at Bletchley ever had to wonder whether Enigma was breakable. 3 Poles had already proved that it was. There's a second name, the popular retellings drop, and this one was standing in the same building. Gordon Welchman, another Cambridge mathematician, worked out that the Enigma plug board was reciprocal. If B is plugged to G, then G is plugged to B. He turned that into a wiring frame called the diagonal board, and when he brought it over, Turing didn't buy it. Welchman's own account of the moment is blunt. Turing was incredulous at first, and then he studied the diagram and agreed the idea would work. Bolt the diagonal board on, and the numbers collapse. From that 158 million down to just over 1 million. That is a search you can actually run in a day. It also killed the earlier requirement that a crib produce at least 3 loops before the machine was any use, which had been throttling how often the thing could be pointed at anything. So the correct name, and the name the National Museum of Computing uses, is the Turing-Welchman Bombe. 2 men. 1 machine. And a war fought on what came out of it. Which brings us to the question everybody asks about this place, and almost nobody answers honestly. How much did it actually matter? You've heard the figure. 2 years off the war, 14 million lives saved. Let's take that apart, because the second half of it has no source whatsoever. Nobody has been able to trace 14 million to a named historian. It circulates in popular articles and gets repeated as though somebody counted. Cut it. The 2 years is a different case, because it comes from someone real. Harry Hinsley was a Bletchley veteran who went on to write the official multi-volume history of British intelligence in the war, and his conclusion was that the intelligence shortened the war by not less than 2 years, and probably by 4. Two things about that. It is a claim about ultra, meaning the entire intelligence output of around 10,000 people at Bletchley and everything the commanders did with it. It is not one man's personal statistic, and it's contested. Other assessments put the effect at months rather than years, and the standard caution among historians is that you simply cannot calculate a counterfactual war in months or years at all. So the honest answer is that the code breaking mattered enormously, and the number is an argument rather than a measurement. He was one of the reasons it worked. He was never the only one. 3 more myths, quickly. First, the machine was never called Christopher. In the 2014 film, he names the Bombe after Christopher Morcom, and it's a lovely scene, and it didn't happen. There's no evidence he named any machine after anyone. The name comes down from the Polish Bombe. Second, he did not build Colossus. Colossus was the first large-scale electronic programmable computer. It attacked the Lorenz cipher rather than Enigma, and it was designed and built by a post office telephone engineer named Tommy Flowers, working from ideas in Max Newman's section, with Flowers putting his own money in when the wartime establishment wouldn't back a machine full of valves. Turing's contribution on that side of the house was a hand method called Turingary and an introduction. Third, and this is the one people get most annoyed about, he did not invent the computer. The Manchester Mark I's hardware belonged to Frederick Williams and Tom Kilburn. What Turing did there was the software. He designed its programming system and wrote what's generally called the world's first programming manual. Honestly, his real claim is bigger than the one people keep making for him. He didn't build the first computer. He worked out what a computer is. In 1948 he moved to Manchester, and in 1950 he published a paper in the philosophy journal, Mind, that opens with a single sentence. I propose to consider the question, can machines think? Then he refuses to answer it, on the grounds that the question as posed is meaningless, and replaces it with a game. Put a person and a machine behind a wall. Let an interrogator send written questions to both, and try to work out which is which. If the interrogator can't reliably tell, then arguing about whether the machine really thinks is arguing about nothing at all. He called it the imitation game. Everybody else calls it the Turing test. And 3/4 of a century later, it's still the frame around every argument about artificial intelligence you have ever had. He also suggested you shouldn't try to program an adult mind in the first place. Build something closer to a child's, and educate it. At the same time, he was writing a chess program called Turochamp, with no machine fast enough to run it. So in 1952, he played a game by executing the algorithm himself, on paper, at roughly half an hour a move. And in January of that year he published something else entirely, on how a chemical process could turn a featureless ball of cells into a spotted, striped, patterned animal. That paper founded a field too. That same month somebody broke into his house. The 23rd of January 1952, Wilmslow, Cheshire. He'd recently begun a relationship with a 19-year-old named Arnold Murray, and the man who'd got in through his window turned out to be an acquaintance of Murray's. Now think about the position he's in. Homosexual acts were a criminal offence in Britain. Murray had already indicated he could expose him. The obvious move, the safe move, is to say nothing and swallow the loss. He called the police anyway, and when they pressed him on how he knew who might have done it, he told them the truth about the relationship. Under questioning, he admitted to sexual activity with Murray on 3 occasions, which, in the law of the time, was 3 separate confessions to a crime. He was charged with gross indecency under a section of an act from 1885. The trial was on the 31st of March 1952 at Knutsford in Cheshire, and on advice he pleaded guilty. So he wasn't a defendant fighting a case. He was a man who had reported a theft and ended up in the dock himself, with the burglary reduced to a footnote. Then came the sentence. And the sentence is the thing the British state has been trying to apologise for ever since. Murray, who had a previous conviction for larceny, got 12 months conditional discharge. Turing got 12 months probation, on condition that he submit to treatment by a qualified medical practitioner at Manchester Royal Infirmary. In practice, that meant a year of injections of stilboestrol, a synthetic oestrogen. The reasoning, such as it was, ran that if male hormones drive desire, then female hormones will switch it off. The effects were impotence and the growth of breast tissue, and friends recorded that he found that last part somewhat amusing, which tells you something about how he was holding himself together. The drug could also act as a depressant on the brain. By the end of the probation, the doctors had moved him to a hormone implant in his thigh, and he had it taken out, understanding that some of what had been done wasn't going to reverse. And then came the second sentence, the one no court passed. He lost his security clearance. His consultancy to the codebreakers ended. The agency that had grown out of Bletchley closed its door, and the government he'd worked for through the war decided the man who had helped read the German Navy's mail was now a risk. He kept his university post. He had about 2 years left. On the 8th of June 1954, his housekeeper found him dead in bed at the house in Wilmslow. The post-mortem put the death the previous day. He was 41. The cause was cyanide poisoning. Beside the bed was an apple with a few bites taken out of it. The coroner's inquest returned a verdict of suicide, and for most of 70 years that has been the settled story. The persecuted genius, the poisoned apple, a fairy tale ending chosen deliberately. It is not settled. Jack Copeland, who has spent a career working through Turing's papers, argues the 1954 verdict is not supportable, and that the evidence heard at that inquest wouldn't be accepted today as sufficient to establish suicide. Copeland's case runs roughly like this. The apple was never analysed for cyanide, so the delivery route is an assumption rather than a finding, and Turing habitually left half-eaten apples lying around. He kept a working chemistry rig in the tiny spare room, gold-plating spoons, which involves potassium cyanide, wired into the ceiling light. People who saw him in the weeks before described him as cheerful rather than despairing. Copeland's reading is accidental inhalation. Others hold to suicide and point to a man chemically altered by court order and cut out of his own life's work. Nobody has produced the document that would settle it, so we won't pretend one exists. He died of cyanide, and how it got into him is genuinely unresolved. The apology came 57 years after the conviction. On the 10th of September 2009, after a public petition, Prime Minister Gordon Brown said that on behalf of the British government and all those who live freely thanks to Alan's work, he was very proud to say, "We're sorry, you deserved so much better." On Christmas Eve 2013, the Queen granted a posthumous royal pardon at the Justice Secretary's request. That was unusual in itself, because a pardon normally needs a family petition or evidence that you didn't do it, and neither applied here. Chris Grayling said Turing deserved to be remembered for his contribution to the war effort and his legacy to science. Fair enough. It was also a pardon for exactly one man. Around 49,000 others had been convicted under the same law, and they got nothing that day. The Policing and Crime Act of 2017, which everyone calls Turing's Law, widened it, and the widening is narrower than the headline suggested. It's automatic only if you're dead. Living men have to apply and can be refused. And no, the Apple logo has nothing to do with any of this. The designer, Rob Janoff, has said he'd never heard of Turing, and that the bite is there so the shape doesn't read as a cherry. His face went onto the Bank of England's £50 note on the 23rd of June 2021, his birthday. Computing's highest prize carries his name. Here's what I keep coming back to. He spent his life asking whether a machine could be made to think, and the mechanism that eventually broke him wasn't thinking at all. A statute from 1885. A probation condition. A clearance revoked by procedure. There's no single villain in it, just a state doing paperwork to a man it owed. And the correction has arrived in fragments ever since. An apology. One pardon. A law with conditions attached. So give the Poles their credit. Give Welchman his. Give Flowers his. It doesn't make what he did any smaller, it makes it real, and a real man is worth more than a lone genius who never existed in the first place. Which leaves the question I'd actually like your answer to. If the apple was never tested, and the scholar who knows those papers best says the verdict wouldn't stand up today, which version do you believe, and why? Tell me in the comments. And if you want more stories where the official record turns out to be the strangest part, you already know where to find them.